Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Autodesk Revit to Unreal Engine, next generation production pipeline. My name is Imantas, and I am Studio Kibit's company founder and CTO, and I'm really excited to be hosting this session today. Before we started, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to send through the chat tab at the bottom of your player, and we will be answering the questions at the end of the session. Now, the main idea of this webinar is to show the latest workflow between engineering architecture softwares to real-time engine like Unreal Engine, and to show how you can move like the one click from Revit to Unreal Engine. So we will start from the Revit. So in Revit, I do have a really simple project. It's from a template of Revit. And whenever you're installing Unreal Engine, now you can export, and Revit as well, you can export your 3D project to Unreal Engine. Now, the DataSmith technology, and you're getting this technology whenever you're installing Unreal Engine, you can use this from Adds In menu, in the main menu in the Revit. And here we have Export 3D View. And actually, the good news is that it's only one click. You don't need to use any options whenever you're exporting the project. And you can see it, for example, so I will mark this exporter here. And you will find very same icon in other softwares. If, for example, you're using, I don't know, for example, 3ds Max, Inventor, ArchiCAD, and other 3D applications. Now, 3D export view, I'm pressing 3D, and that's it. You see, they're asking only about name. So this is one of the main difference whenever you're exporting with different kind of file formats. For example, if your workflow is based on FBX file, so you will get a lot of options. So for example, do you want to export your textures? Do you want to export your all models? Do you want to export animations, cameras, lighting, and whatever you have in your project? And you have additional options about, for example, scale of your project. Now, whenever you're exporting in DataSmith file format, you don't bother about these things. For example, if, for example, you have problems with the scale, if you're working, for example, FBX file formats. Now, DataSmith file format, you're just exporting. So exporting this one in your other project, and now I'm opening my Unreal Engine. Now, before we're starting to import anything in Unreal Engine, so I want to just introduce a little about Unreal Engine. So first of all, Unreal Engine is real-time engine, and it's not modeling software. So you can bring your content from various softwares, various pipelines. And for example, you can even add sounds here, interactivity, virtual reality. So you like adding the content, so you do not create the content from the scratch. So in this example, I already set up several projects from the Revit. Now, in order to get the Unreal Engine your project from the Revit, here is import DataSmith file. Now, DataSmith file was introduced to Unreal Engine Studio, and if you cannot see this icon, for example, if you're trying to install the software and try this very same pipeline, so just double check if it's active. So here in plugins, and you see that we have a lot of plugins, and we have in Studio, just a second. Okay, Unreal Studio, and you can see we have even CAD importer, we have FBX importer, and here you go, we have DataSmith importer as well. So whenever this is active, you will see this icon here. Now, if your project was imported, or you started a project previously without DataSmith, whenever you enable it, he's converting that project in Unreal Studio project. It means that you can use DataSmith importing from that point. Now, whenever you're importing, he just asks where you want to allocate your project. So here I'm clicking import DataSmith, and I have my project, and that's it. I'm clicking opening, and I just need to choose the place where I want to move it. So for example, it's Revit project, and pressing OK. Now he's asking, do I want to use this version, if there is any conflict or not. And from this point, he's letting to choose what I want to import. So in this case, I will choose geometry and materials and textures. I don't want to use any lighting at the moment because I do have some lighting. And the cameras, we will create our own cameras. And that's it. From that on, just import. Now to make it faster, I will cancel this one. And I will show my pre-imported stuff. Just a second to load it. Now here we have, so this is our content browser. So whatever you have in your project, you will find in this place. Now you see, this is the Unreal Engine, Revit Unreal Engine project, and we can see that we do have our project. And here we go. Now you can move your whole project. So I already did that. Just a second while he saves. Now while he's saving, so here, so we have our, as I mentioned, content browser. So everything related with your project, so it's materials, textures, geometry, sounds, VR interactivity, or augmented reality. So this is your pre-made stuff. Now in the right side, so here we have settings, and this is our world outliner. So whatever you're using in your world, Unreal Engine world, you will find in this place. Okay, going back a little. Okay, so I have like two projects, even three. So this one is from Revit architecture. So this is how it looks. And at the moment, the textures, the lighting and everything from the Revit is default. So it's quite nice result, even if you do nothing. And I think whenever using this kind of software in your workflow, I think you're thinking about competitors, for example, Lumion. So in Lumion, you can get similar things, but whenever you're achieving the more advanced result, for example, you want to add cameras, animation, and animate objects, create some scenarios, so you can find everything here in Unreal Engine. So for example, the materials, everything is from the Revit, so this is not advanced ones, but for example, I'm selecting this roof, and I can find that I do have the mesh, and I do have my elements, and for example, I have my texture over here. So for example, I click and double click, and I can add, for example, to this one glossiness, or to say that this one is metal from this point, and it's metal. And for example, I'm just adding some reflectivity. So you can adjust the textures, but it's not necessary. For example, if you do have your own library of materials, you can use them here to make it look really nice. Now, other things. So for example, I can go to this place. You can see that we do have terrain, and actually to adjust terrain in Unreal Engine, it's pretty simple. And you can even add, for example, grass, mud, whatever you need for your project. So for example, I do have this project, a structure one, and I want to change a little terrain over here. So here in main menu, we do have landscape, and I can sculpt this terrain. So for example, I'm pressing sculpt, and what I want to do, for example, I want to flatten this area. I'm clicking flatten this area, and I'm choosing my brush size. For example, I will do like this, a little follow, and for example, now I can change, and you see that all elements on the terrain, so for example, trees, grass, is following the terrain shape. So the trees and everything stand still in the very same place. Now, you can see that all this grass is dynamic. And for example, I want to change this one. So you can even paint on your terrain. So for example, I'm clicking paint. And here we have some different materials. So for example, I want to make it, for example, that puddle. And for example, I can do like this. Now I want to add a little grass in this place, just a little. And you see, because of this terrain is dynamic, you can see that whenever I'm painting the grass, the all elements is appearing on the grass. See? And for example, once again, if I use, for example, different one, for example, this one over here, now I have this kind of grass. See? And you can blend them, so because you can use the different, for example, strains. And for example, if I use that puzzle once again, and for example, I want to use grass, but not so intense anymore, and I want to add a little, see? So now I'm painting like this. So you do have a lot of options to set your terrain in your own way. And as I mentioned, you do have quite a lot of sculpting things, and you can start adding additional things. For example, smooth, we can use just a simple sculpt, for example, to add like this and like this. And from this point, I can flatten this area. Now, whenever you work on this project, you can see I do have real nice lighting. And you can use, for example, HDRI images. So HDRI stands for high dynamic range images. So you can even make a dynamic cloud with these things. Now you can add your custom light as well. So here in the main menu, so we have this place, and for example, we have lights. And you do see we have several options, and everything works in real time. So for example, now this area is quite dark, and for example, I can add point light in that place. If, for example, we're changing scenario, for example, from daylight to night light. And here we have, for example, intensity, we have attenuation radius, we do have even light color, and I can say that this color is like this. And you can duplicate your light, so you can add all these things. Now, some projects, so this project is now quite colorful, and you want to change something and you want to adjust the color or whatever. So for that, we do have even real nice things. So it's post-processing volume, and I can show how it works. So for example, we have post-process volume. And now, for example, with this one, before we're doing anything, I will ask him. Okay, so we will use unbound to use in the whole world of the Unreal Engine. And now, for example, we do have color grading, and I can change, for example, my white balance, and I can use temperature for that. And for example, to make it more like this or more cold project, you see? So I can do everything in real time, and I can turn it off. Now we have different effects here. For example, we have exposure, or we have, for example, bloom effect, camera effects, imaging effects, for example, vignetting. And now we're doing it like this. So you have a lot of different things that you can change here in post-process volume. Now, the main idea to use this box, for example, if you do have several projects, so for example, now we have this structure project, here we have, go up a little, we have different projects here. I can even scale this box, and I can say that to use these color correction effects only in this box. So whenever camera goes inside, it changes. So for example, now I'm going back, and I don't want to use this one. And now, for example, I'm going inside, and here we will change, for example, something more interesting. For example, we do have ambient occlusion. So ambient occlusion is responsible to add shadows in the corner. So I want to add intensity, and I want more intense because I want to show the all details of my project. For example, like this, and I can adjust the radius, so how far it can go. And you can see that I do now have a lot more details with ambient occlusion. Now this ambient occlusion, and I will add color grading a little. I like to make it this. And whenever I'm leaving, you see, This is in post-processing volume. This is out of processing volume. So I'm in occlusion. You see? So you change. So you can define different scenarios with this post-processing volumes. Now, other things. So the main idea is to use Unreal Engine because you want to get results instant. So for example, if you do want to get, for example, quite nice image with high resolution, so here we can even ask a high resolution screenshot. Make it a nice place, for example like this. Okay, and now I can say maybe like this, yeah, high resolution screenshot. And I, for example, so now he will create image from the size I do use in my workspace, but I want to increase the size. For example, I will triple the size and I will ask to take a screenshot. And now I have this one image. It's pretty fast. Keep in mind that you do have, the resolution of this one is quite a big one. And for example, if it prior, and here you go. So it's almost 3K, and I get this image in seconds. Okay, so keep in mind that this one is really fast one. And for example, if you're preparing something for printing, so you can increase your resolution, for example, even 6 times. Okay, so and you can even get, for example, some depth masks and other options. You can even get render elements, for example, for post-production. Now, other thing to create video or cinematic for your project, it's really nice thing in Unreal Engine. So here you can see in top main menu. So here we have cinematic. So you can create videos in real time. Okay. For example, we have this project from our client, and this one is you animating the walkthrough and you want to show that something happening in the project. So for example, so I'm going to here and I have animation prepared, and I have a camera. For example, I will use camera, and you can play in real time. Just double check your animation. Keep in mind that whatever happening now in animation, you can render in really fast way. So for example, comparing the render engines like V-Ray, Corona, Redshift, or something like this, so you're getting instant result. For example, you can even animate your object. So you see, for example, from this point, you can see that the roof is going up. So you can make it like real nice animation. Okay, just play. And you can show your project details. Now the question is it difficult to create things like this in Unreal Engine? And actually it's not. The first thing is that the Unreal Engine, whenever you're creating a cinematic, the nice thing is that it's non-destructive way to animate something. Whenever you're creating your cinematic, for example, I'm adding some level sequence. For example, we can go to this one. And I want to animate the camera and some objects over here. So first of all, I will add a cinematic, for example, add level sequence, and I will name it okay. Okay, just a second. I think he's saving something. Just one more time, cinematic. I'll try to add the new one. Okay, just remember the name, content, and it's webinar data. Save it. Now, whenever creating sequencer, And whenever you're starting to animate something, you're animating only in this sequencer. This does mean that if you have several sequences, you can animate very same object in different way, in non-destructive way. And whenever you changing your mind, you can just cancel or even delete the sequencer, and you will lose only that sequencer, that animation. But the objects and other animations still here. Okay. So for example, so first of all, I want to animate the camera. So to camera, I just click and create a new camera, and that's it. Now I can see the camera. Okay, and I can change the options over here in the right side. I do have the options about my camera, the size, the feedback setting sensor. So it's a lot of things here. Now, in order to animate this camera, it's quite straightforward. So first of all, I just need to say that I want to animate my transforms. So in this case, location, rotation, scale, everything. And here I can ask that I want to add key for all, and I want to add keys. And I'm pressing the first key. Okay, now I'm giving some time. For example, I'm giving for 2 seconds, for example, to go like this. And you see, it's automatically creating the keys. Now I will give additional, for example, several seconds to go to that point. And now play the animation. Now I can, in this, I can even change, so I will minimize a little. So now I can, so for example, I want to extend my animation, and I want to say, okay, so these keys are going here. Now I have this nice slow animation. Okay, now I want to animate several objects during that animation. So for example, I'm selecting, for example, this concrete floor, and I will bring these floors, for example, so we have like this, yeah. So for example, these floors, so I'm just dragging this sequencer, and I'm saying that these objects should be animated in this sequencer only. So this is why it's non-destructive way to animate something. Okay, so now I can see the keys. So for example, for these ones, okay, so we go into the first one, I can see my camera keys, these white ones. And for example, so I'm selecting the floors, and you see we have transformations for all of them. And I want to say, okay, so in the beginning of animation, I'm adding the keys. Now, after a couple of seconds, so for example, after 3 seconds, I want to say that this one goes down, this one is going up, and now, for example, this one goes from that direction, and that's it. And you see, every selected object has its own path. So you can even change how it goes from one point to another point. Now, for example, in this case, animation looks like this. I can even change the places. And for example, so these keys are going here, and these ones in the beginning, like this. Now these ones are going over here. Now I do have animation, like everything goes to one place. So I'm going to the animation, play animation. You see how easy it was? So you just swapping the keys and you have like totally different animation. And imagine that if you have, if your project is based on process and you want to show the process and hierarchy of something, so this is how it works. Now, as I mentioned, it's non-destructive way. So what if I will add another sequencer and I will animate the very same object in different way? So to do that, I will close this one and I will add the new one. Okay, now the second one, save, and now I have a new one. In this new one, I will create the camera, a new one, and we will add to this location. Okay, now I want to add very same object, so this one, and now this one, I do want to animate transforms as well. So from this point, And for example, the scale, we'll change the scale of the object like this. Okay, and now after a couple seconds, okay, now I will move it up a little. I can scale it once again. Okay, so scale it, for example, like this. And we will add a little rotation. For example, even from the beginning, I will add a little rotation like this. And now the thing is, so now I have two different sequencers. So now I can go back. So you see, so everything now in one place. And now here in cinematics, I have different scenarios. If I'm going to the first one, and I will ask the camera, for example, of this one. So this one is animated in this way. Now the next one's cinematic 2. Now this one is animated like this. So it's like this, and I will ask for the camera as well, like this. And now it's totally different animation for very same object. So this is the main point of non-destructive way to animate your project. And for example, even if I'm leaving this window, so it's now default view and there is no animation at all at this point. How cool is that? Now, other thing, so the main point of animation, you want to export that animation to render. Now, for example, in different softwares, it takes different time to render, but in real-time engine, it takes really fast. So for example, so I'm going to our animation we just created, and I will ask the camera, and here you can ask for the render this move. Now, the main idea is they're asking what you want to use, for example, for the frame rate, so you can add your frame rate. The resolution, you can see you can even render 4K resolution. And for image output format, so you can render directly to video, but if in your company you do using post-processing, so you can render even in image sequences, and even you can use for deep composition with EXR files. So for example, so in this case, we will use just video file format, and I will double check the duration. It's only 4.5 seconds. It's okay for this one. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And that's it. So I just use where I want to save this file. So we can save in this one. And I will leave 4K to render this file, and that's it. So do you want to save? We don't want to save at the moment. Just give a couple seconds to start calculating everything. Now I will bring this window over here. Now he's preparing, and here you can see it's capturing video. It's 5 seconds before he starts to calculate anything. Okay, and I guess this camera, yep, this camera is okay. Okay. Here's our window. Okay, now he's calculating 4K video. Okay, while he's rendering, you can start adding the questions in chat bar, and I will start answering them. It will take a couple seconds to render. Okay, okay, he's going like this. If, for example, you're using full HD resolution instead of 4K, you can imagine it's rendering faster. Now, whenever he starts rendering, he's using all your GPU, so it's GPU-based render. It takes some CPU, but the majority of processes is going through the GPU. Okay, just a couple seconds. If, for example, comparing render times with common render engine to get 4K one frame, it's one image, in most cases, even if really good hardware, it will take some time, at least 10 or 20 minutes for one image. Okay, and now where is my video? Just a second. Okay, and here we go. This is our 4K. You can see all the details. Keep in mind that materials is very same from the Revit. And it's 4K video. Okay, we can even double check the file format, properties, details, and you can see that this is 4K resolution of this video. Now, to make project real nice and advanced one, you need to play with the textures quite a lot. And this is one of the next webinar, is to use texture softwares and implement that in Unreal Engine with Sense Painter. So to make this really nice stuff with Unreal Engine, because these textures is from Revit and you can make it like really realistic, really. Okay, it's time for questions. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, you have your question bar in this software and you can add questions. And we do have first our questions. Okay, so Alex is asking, do I need to rescale the geometry of Revit models first before exporting them to Unreal? Nope. So because even the DataSmith technology, you just need to press export 3D view and you don't even bother with scale. Keep in mind that Unreal Engine default unit is meters. So for example, if I'm creating a simple box, or for example, basic cube, so you can see that the scale for this one is 111. So it's everything about meters, okay? And the next question is, and from Andrew, can I use standard assets from illumination and shading? Are these lights and shadows default tools from Unreal Engine? So yes, in Unreal Engine, we do have dedicated lighting system. We do have materials, and you can even use the different kind of materials and lighting from the Unreal Market Store. So for example, Unreal Market Store. Okay, so this one. So in Marketplace, you can find different things. And for example, if you're using this Unreal Engine store, you can add, for example, textures or materials. And you will find different things, for example, for different shading, for example, moon realistic texture as example. Okay, the next one. Is it possible to export the Revit model directly to Unreal and apply textures, materials to 3D model in Unreal Engine? Yes, you can. As I mentioned from the first question, direct export is using 3D view. So, and don't confuse, you can export your project, a Revit project, to FBX, and it's still capable to use in Unreal Engine. But to make it a real nice workflow, to make sure that you're getting all information from Revit, it's better to use, in this case, DataSmith instead of FBX file format. Okay, now next question is from James. James asking, can you please confirm that Unreal Engine is free? So yes, it is. So Unreal Engine is free, and you can download just from unrealengine.com. And he's as well asking, how much would it cost to implement Unreal Engine in our workflow? What would our team need to term of starting using this workflow? Now, in order to start using these technologies in your workflow, you just need to review your current workflow. So for example, if at the moment you're using, for example, default Revit render engine and you want advanced one, so I think it's more than easy to move to that workflow. Now, if you're already using some dedicated render engines, for example, V-Ray for Revit, it's actually even better, because if your workflow is based on V-Ray and you can use your current materials for Revit with Unreal, because the resolution from Chaos Group, that there is V-Ray for Unreal Engine and V-Ray for Revit as well. So your workflow, if it's based on V-Ray, it's still capable to render everything in Unreal Engine. So for example, you can see that we do have V-Ray for a lot of software, and for example, one of we're looking for is V-Ray for Unreal Engine. So from any V-Ray platform, you can move to V-Ray for Unreal Engine as well. What would our team starting using this workflow? So yeah, so one more thing, if you want to plan, if you do have a plan to use Unreal Engine, so keep in mind that it's GPU-based software, so you do need to think a little about your hardware as well. So for example, in Revit, in most cases, it's using RAM and CPU. Now, Unreal Engine is really intense in calculation, so you do need to have GPU in order to use Unreal Engine. And the last question, do you do just training, or you could also support us on our first project or projects? Actually, doing the trainings in one hand, in another hand, companies like Jacobs Engineering, or for example, CSD engineers, they implementing the workflows and they ask for support. So we're supporting in every stage of the project, if it's training or it's just like a pilot project. And actually, this one project is real from CSD engineers. They asked to demonstrate how Unreal Engine can use Unreal Engine to show the process and to show some, for example, elements from the project. So yes, we're doing like pilot project as well. Is there any more questions? So if there is no any more questions, and for example, or you don't have like questions right now, you can write directly to us, and the recording of this webinar will be live tomorrow. So if you want to see, we will send you details where you can find this video and this webinar. Thanks a lot for your attention. I hope I will see you in the next our webinars in different topics. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, just let us know and we will answer these questions. Thank you and have a nice day.